Welcome to the Deep Dive. Our mission is to take your sources, no matter how dense or unexpected, and find the knowledge that immediately shifts your perspective.
And today, we're diving into one of those sources that has shaped human conduct for millennia.
We're taking on an entire chapter of ancient wisdom, Proverbs chapter 21.
That's right. And this chapter, it's just a masterpiece of conciseness. It's this rapid-fire sequence of 31 maxims on everything from, how empires fall, how to manage your money.
Why you should maybe not move in with a contentious person.
Exactly. So our goal is to distill these surprising, durable truths about ethical life, genuine prosperity, and divine control, and make them really sharp and relevant for you today.
And we are jumping straight into the deep end because the chapter kicks off with a statement that tackles the ultimate question of who is truly in charge. It's an incredibly bold claim about power right there in verse 1.
It is. It states, "The king's heart is a waterway in the hand of the Lord. He directs it where he pleases."
Wow. I mean, that is just a staggering assertion. It basically strips the most powerful person on earth, the monarch, the ruler of ultimate control.
Completely. His decision-making center, his heart, is just a channel.
And the imagery there, a waterway, that's very specific, isn't it?
It's critical. In ancient Judea, controlling water was the ultimate engineering feat. It was a sign of absolute power.
Like Hezekiah's tunnel.
Exactly. You have kings like Hezekiah building these massive, complex irrigation tunnels to make sure water flowed exactly where they needed it, even during a siege. The analogy is immediate. Just as a human engineer can divert a powerful stream, a far greater force is redirecting the very will of the ruler.
But doesn't that analogy, doesn't it risk making God seem a bit small? If the comparison is a human engineer, even a brilliant one, does that limit the divine power?
That's a really sharp point, and that's where the context is so important. The king's heart is compared to a channel that he directs. So the emphasis isn't on the limited scale of, say, Hezekiah's tunnel, but on the unlimited scope of the force doing the redirecting.
Okay, so it connects to this larger, overarching theme of divine sovereignty.
Yes, that ultimately no human plan, no regime, no tyrannical will operates outside of this higher purpose.
So the person pulling the levers of state, the CEO, the political leader,
Yeah.
they're ultimately answering to a control room they can't even see.
Precisely. And the chapter immediately reinforces this idea of, the ultimate futility of human opposition. You have to look at verses 30 and 31.
Right, they bookend the whole chapter. It starts with the king's heart and it ends with war.
And that final couplet, people quote it all the time, but it's worth hearing again in this context.
There is no wisdom, no understanding, no counsel that can prevail against the Lord. And then the intensely practical follow-up. A horse is prepared for the day of battle, but victory is of the Lord.
It just perfectly captures that tension. Preparation, designing the supply chain, training the army, preparing the horse for battle, that's all human effort.
Yeah.
It's necessary. It's even commended.
But the outcome, the final success or failure, that's directed by a force beyond your prep work.
Exactly. And this, of course, raises the really tough question that people have debated for millennia.
If God is in control, why is history filled with so many cruel, unjust leaders who act against every moral code? Is this just endorsing fatalism?
It's not. The text isn't removing moral responsibility. It's talking about two different spheres. In the sphere of moral choice, rulers are fully responsible for their wickedness, for their arrogance, which verse 4 explicitly calls sin.
But in the sphere of the ultimate outcome.
Yes, in the sphere of judgment, the rise and fall of nations, human counsel and military might, the prepared horse, they just can't thwart that divine purpose. It's a distinction between human preparation and the divine verdict.
That's a powerful transition. So if that's the reality of external power, what does the one in charge expect from us? What does internal integrity look like?
Well, the chapter pivots immediately from politics to personal ethics, and the answer is, it's a radical reframing of priorities.
Verse 3, the central ethical statement.
To do righteousness and justice is more desirable to the Lord than sacrifice.
So that's a direct challenge to the idea that just, showing up for religious services or performing rituals guarantees your standing.
A huge challenge. If ritual is secondary, then the core ethical conduct is what matters.
So what are we talking about specifically? What are righteousness and justice here?
We have to look at the Hebrew terms. It's tzedakah and mishpat. Tzedakah is righteousness. It's about doing what is morally right and fair in your daily dealings.
And mishpat.
And mishpat is justice. It's the active application of fairness, especially in protecting the vulnerable.
Yeah.
So the text is saying that, writing a fair contract, dealing honestly with a neighbor, standing up for someone being exploited, that stuff is more valuable than any offering you could make.
That sets the bar incredibly high.
Yeah.
But then the text immediately suggests that we're actually the worst judges of our own motives.
Precisely. Verse 2 gives this profound psychological warning. All a man's ways seem right to him, but the Lord weighs the heart.
It's timeless. We are masters of rationalization. We see our actions through a lens that's warped by what we want.
We do. It's ancient wisdom diagnosing confirmation bias. We create our own ethical blind spots.
So a leader might see a risky corporate move as aggressive growth, but fail to see it as, well, reckless or fraudulent, because their heart, their ambition, is justifying the action.
That's the modern parallel. And this chapter requires that inner scrutiny because if the motive is wrong, verse 27 shows that even the outward religious act becomes, actively harmful.
That's the warning about the corrupt offering. The sacrifice of the wicked is detestable. How much more so when brought with ill intent?
Right. It means you can't use charity or public piety as a mask for a life built on injustice. An offering is worthless if it was bought with dirty money or given with a proud, self-justifying heart. Ritual without integrity is offensive.
So if integrity is the engine, the text then asks, what happens when we apply that to our work and our wealth?
And here the contrast is between two paths to financial stability. Verse 5 is so clear. It separates the diligent from the hasty. The plans of the diligent, the chariots, they bring plenty.
But haste, that frantic search for a shortcut that leads directly to poverty.
It's ancient wisdom commending careful, sustainable business strategy over just impulsive action.
And it contrasts that diligence with the temptation of quick, deceptive wealth. Verse 6 talks about making a fortune by a lying tongue.
As a vanishing mist, a deadly pursuit. It's quick, it's illusory, and it's dangerous.
The key word there is vanishing, isn't it?
It is. Dishonest gain never sticks. And this wasn't an abstract idea. The lying tongue was often paired with dishonest scales. We have archaeological finds that confirm merchants used fraudulent weights to shortchange customers while distracting them with, smooth sales talk.
So today that's like opaque financial products or misleading marketing, the get-rich-quick schemes that just disappear.
Exactly. But dishonesty usually comes from a deeper flaw than just greed. It comes from pride.
And the chapter zeroes in on that root sin in verse 4. Haughty eyes and a proud heart. The guides of the wicked are sin.
That arrogant attitude, gava in Hebrew, it's the great destabilizer in all wisdom literature. Pride stops you from taking correction, from seeing your own blind spots. It makes you think your wisdom can prevail.
So the proud are set up for a crash. But while they crash, the lazy, they just suffer this slow internal death.
Yeah, the fate of the slacker, the Atzel, is one of the most sobering warnings in the chapter.
It's tragic because it's a self-inflicted wound.
It is. Verse 25 says, "The craving of the slacker kills him because his hands refuse to work." They want prosperity, they covet success, but they won't put in the effort. So they're destroyed by the frustration of their own unfulfilled desires.
Okay, we've gone from kings and corporate ethics to the very specific and highly relatable world of domestic life.
And this is where the chapter offers some of its most memorable, vivid, and maybe uncomfortable analogies.
These are the verses that stick with you. Verse 9 gives us the comparison. Better to live on a corner of the roof than to share a house with a quarrelsome wife.
And then it just doubles down in verse 19, saying it's better to live in the desert, isolated and exposed, than with a contentious partner.
And for you listening, remember, the corner of an ancient flat-roofed house was hot, it was exposed to the elements, it was deeply uncomfortable.
Yet, solitude there is presented as preferable to constant strife. The point is the deep value of peace. Constant conflict destroys the sense of safety that a home is supposed to provide.
So the greatest luxury isn't wealth, it's domestic tranquility.
That's what the wisdom writer is suggesting. But when conflict is inevitable, the text offers this ethically ambiguous but highly pragmatic strategy for de-escalation.
This is verse 14. A gift in secret soothes anger, and a covert bribe pacifies great wrath.
Yeah, this is where historical context really illuminates the pragmatism. That covert bribe or gift in the bosom was a recognizable practice. We know from Akkadian texts that reference something called kupartu, a discreet offering. It was a common tool used to appease powerful officials or cool down violent anger before it escalated publicly. It just recognizes the brutal reality that sometimes a quiet offering prevents a much bigger confrontation.
It's ethically complicated, but what isn't complicated is the chapter's warning about social apathy. That is absolutely clear.
Severe even. Verse 13, whoever shuts his ears to the cry of the poor, he too shall cry out and receive no answer.
That's critical. Ignoring the vulnerable, the doll, is presented as a self-sealing fate.
It is. If you refuse to hear someone's plea when you can help, you forfeit the right to be heard when you're the one in need. It ties right back to that requirement for mishpat active justice as a prerequisite for any kind of divine favor.
Let's finish up by looking at what the chapter defines as true strength and the protective power of self-control.
Wisdom is given staggering weight in the power equation. Verse 22 says, a wise man scales the city of the mighty and pulls down the stronghold in which they trust.
And you have to think about the massive ramparts they've unearthed at sites like Lachish. These were cities that trusted completely in their physical strength.
And the insight is that strategic planning, that intellectual leverage wisdom, chokmah, is ultimately more powerful than brute force.
Insight trumps inertia.
Absolutely. And the ultimate daily application of that wisdom comes down to self-control, specifically in what we say.
Verse 23 is just a foundational lesson in self-preservation that everyone needs to internalize. He who guards his mouth and tongue keeps his soul from distress.
That practice of shomer self-monitoring, it's presented as a proactive defense against self-inflicted trouble. So many of our major life problems, personal and professional, start with a comment we should have kept to ourselves.
A hasty email, a piece of gossip. Guarding the tongue is really about protecting your own inner peace.
It's the difference between stewardship and waste, too. The wise store up precious treasures and oil, while the foolish, they just consume them. The wise have foresight, the fool lives entirely in the present.
And that pursuit of wisdom and ethics, it's all tied up in the promise of verse 21, that pursuing righteousness and loyal love actually finds life, righteousness, and honor. The reward is wholeness and peace.
That's the end goal.
So, after this deep dive, what are the 3 core lessons we can take away and apply to our really complex modern lives?
I'd say first, ethical conduct. That act of justice, mishpat, and righteousness, tzedakah, is paramount. It overrides ritual and appearances. Your internal integrity has to match your external actions.
Okay, number 2.
Second, lasting prosperity is only built through diligence, the cheruts, and truth. That quick, dishonest score is always a vanishing mist.
And third, and this is probably the most difficult one to live with.
It's the lesson on ultimate authority. All human effort, all our planning and preparation, our business plans, our technology, the prepared horse, it must ultimately be submitted to a purpose that is greater than our own. Human prep is necessary, but the final verdict rests elsewhere.
Which brings us right back to where we started. That tension between planning and sovereignty is constant and active in your life today.
It is. So, given that the horse is prepared for battle, but victory is of the Lord, our final provocative thought for you is this. How can you apply the wisdom of chapter 21 today to plan diligently with all your effort and skill, yet hold those plans loosely?